Hello and welcome to Universus. Today we're going to take a look at the verb and noun article around the design space of backups. So this article dropped at 11 PM for me. I just spent 2 and a bit hours wrapping up presents for Flynn's birthday. So I didn't really feel like going live at the time. Plus it's been a while since I've done some afternoon tea. And Card Goblin haven't got back to me for filming a market update, so I had some time left. I had some time free to talk about this. So this is a lot more complicated than it initially looks, in my opinion. I've read it about 4 or 5 times, and every time I read it, I take away a little bit more, which is kind of cool for an article. But in line with the Bill Stark articles, in line with the French vanilla, I don't think this article is really geared at people that understand what backups were made for. It is to clue in, it's to give more information to people who are making the Planeswalker comparisons, who are making all the initial making initial reactions to these cards based on other variants of them. It's the exact same thing I did at the summit. I saw backups and my head immediately went Planeswalkers. I don't like Planeswalkers, and after processing it and actually thinking about it, I actually really like backups. So reading this article did make me reassess my understanding of the game, though, which was very, very cool. So primarily, cards are primarily named after nouns in other games. Our characters are nouns. Most of our assets and actions will be around nouns, which is kind of cool. And then if you look at games like Magic the Gathering, all of their resources are nouns. You have islands, you have swamp, you have all their land alternatives are nouns. I don't know too much about other games, but primarily the resources are nouns. And then when it comes to the cards that are actually doing something, like the spell cards in Magic, the action, the instants and sorceries in MTG, they are all verbs. Now, as pointed out in the article, the very cool thing about Universus is our foundations are verbs. They're phrases, they're verbs, they're adverbs, they're ways. They're not the same as what we find in other games. And that is really, really cool and something unique to this game. And it's something that they're looking like they're wanting to hold on to. So rather than having attacks that stick around as foundations through double-sided cards, or trying to make it more complicated in that aspect, they're saying these are foundations, and they're not literal physical foundations, and that is where I kind of messed up my thinking. If you go back and look at some of our deck building videos that I did with Richard when I'm talking about foundations, I always describe them as the physical foundation of your deck. You build your foundations in your deck, and that is your floor. That is what keeps your deck stable, which to a certain extent it is. But we are a fighting game. We are not a house. We are not a building. We don't need strong. But we don't need to be thinking in such rigid terms. You've got to more think of it as the metaphysical, as Matt's put it in here. You need to think more training arcs, martial arts, fighting. You do not build the foundation of martial arts by staying still. You do not build the foundation of anything by staying still. Building up your foundation in this game requires you to play it. That's a verb. In martial arts, your fundamentals, the foundation of your learning, is done through basics that back up your form, and this is a fighting game. So it's made me think more thematically that when we play our forms, when we check poorly or struggle to conduct a form, we rely on our foundations, we rely on our past experiences, we rely on our characters rely on their past experiences. They rely on the foundations of their combat style to maintain their forms. And that to me has just added a whole new level of flavor to this game. It's got me thinking of things like quick to act. Quick to act in its name would make you think that, your early attacks are your first few things would get the speed. Quick to act says when you're below half, you get 1 speed. So that is not a action that you're taking at that time. That is a memory. That is a foundation of your experiences. Saying, if I had been quicker to act, I would not be below half health. I need to be faster. This is your character hyping themselves up. This is what they're having their shonen moment. So your character goes, I'm below half. If I'd only been faster, if I've only been stronger, if I could only have done this sooner, I could have been better. And then the foundation kicks in and goes, yes, you get that 1 speed. You should have done this. You should have done that. Which to me is very, very cool. It adds a whole new third dimension of this game. It makes me think of my cards and my deck less as a pile of cards and more shaping the personality of the character I'm playing as I do. It's always been something very cool that we do as character. We have our 2 characters, we have our 2 symbols, our 1 symbol, or our 3 symbols, which is which is another thing I'll talk about in another time. But you select your symbol and then you build your deck. And majority of the time, when a deck establishes itself as a meta, that's cool. But every deck has its own personality. People make decisions and change the structure of their deck, and that in turn kind of impacts the outcome of that deck's personality. Again, I could be completely chatting out my butt here. But to me, looking at foundations through this metaphysical, so like looking at them as a 4th dimensional being and seeing them in 3 dimensions is so cool. Usually I don't take him from articles, and reading this initially, I was quite tired. I did take it negatively, but actually reading through it again, actually processing this information, it's foundations are your character's past. Foundations are what make you stronger, and it adds a whole new layer of building after an attack. You build, your attack gets blocked, your attack goes through, doesn't matter. But if you can build foundations after that, you can equate that to the things you learned through that attack. That is nuts to me. So this is really, really cool, and I do like the use of like the homonym, which is, that's English 1 or 2. That's the thing where you have foundations, which are buildings, but also foundations are the basis of your ideals, and that is also what your deck is. Your deck is your ideal. This is the thing you are hoping will progress your story. I think that's really, really cool. I'm thinking about now, actions have become more in line with with adjectives or adverbs. In recent, so we got like chomp, you've got manifest. They're becoming more adjectives, which they may touch on a little bit later on. So backups and mental load. One of the biggest things that people have said about backups is they increase mental load, which, is not wrong. Increasing mental load by adding a new card with new abilities and the fact that they're essentially assets you can punch is cool. But the reasoning behind them, I think most of us had kind of figured this out, is that one, they wanted a way to have Titans stick around more because Titans do kind of swarm or hang around. But the Attack on Titan set is so flavorful, it is so bespoke to the Attack on Titan world. But in Attack on Titan, very rarely do people fight alone. Everyone has some kind of support or backup. Even Annie, during the hunting Eren sort of like mini arc, well, I guess it's a full arc, still gets help from other people. Still has some form of backup. Ymir is a good show of backup. Mikasa and Eren's relationship is a great show of backup. So going into this kind of way of they cannot fight alone. They have to rely on each other. Even the Titans have to rely on each other. Is very, very cool. It's not something we have seen. We have seen in the past with like MHA in the show, people having to team up, but generally it always breaks off in that shonen tradition of 1v1 fights or 3v3 fights, which then break off into mini 1v1s. Even in Yu Yu Hakusho, there's only like one or two situations where it's more than a one-on-one. And when we're adapting fighting games, that kind of makes sense because, most fighting games are one-on-one or all-out brawls where it's one versus many. No one's really backing each other up. Attack on Titan gives us a great opportunity to kind of have this way of going, these are my backups. And this could have been huge looking backwards. Looking at things like Kota or Eri, even Trinket. Even looking at Trinket from the Critical Role, that could have been a backup if we could have got them out sooner. And it's something I have talked about a lot looking forward, is things like Dark Shadow. Dark Shadow would be a perfect backup card, and it kind of falls in line with what is being said here. Why would you why should attacks only stick around when they do? Attacks can have lasting effects. Attacks can be a way for these characters to introduce themselves into the battlefield as characters come into backup. Eri and Kota would be good examples of the pure backups, but Dark Shadow coming down, doing a punch, it's like Dark Shadow attacks or summon Dark Shadow. You play it, it does its thing, and then it builds in because Tokiyami is now backed up by Dark Shadow. One for all and all for one. Having the past version holders of One for All show up as backups. Having the remnants of the quirks One for All has stolen become active and having them as backups. That would be very, very cool. Even things like Spirit Beast Pooh, which it was a foundation, would be a very cool backup and very thematic. Backups open up such a door into making sets feel so much more thematic. And it's great to see that we're not, even 18 years in, we're not scared to be innovative. Huge shout out to Matt Smith, because everyone was assuming that Bill Stark made these because everyone says Bill Stark wants to make this basically magic. But we can see here Matt Smith and the design team are going, we don't want to be magic. We don't want noun foundations. We don't want to be sat here just with name cards that don't do anything. Name cards are cool for excluding hype around the characters, but the verb cards are so much more cooler when you're playing them. And you do have you have 8% full coloring, which is such a long name that people call it 8%. But there's something special about I don't know if it's an ADHD thing for me. I would love a neurotypical situation for me, but it's great when I think about my decks and the attacks I put in there. I can almost visualize the characters doing the moves and sort of like how fights play out through like almost anime style visualization in my head of like shadowboxing, which is very, very cool. And the fact that Matt Smith and the design team have gone, this is a good aspect we have in our game. This is something we shouldn't change because it's unique to us. And this is not a problem because, backups aren't really solving any issues. It's more taking something that's unique about our game and going, can we push it a little bit further? Can we take a little bit of what these noun cards get hyped for without impacting anything else? Can we have the best of both worlds? Can we push the envelope out? And like I said, everyone was just assuming Bill Stark created the backups because they're kind of like planeswalkers. But it's not. It's a way to impact the board. And I really want backups to be successful. I think backups I've come a long way since the beginning of June, where I just thought backups were just going to be completely ignored like assets, or that backups were not healthy for the game because it was just going to be people comparing it to Magic and because of Planeswalkers. I have changed my stance on backups a lot. Backups are very, very cool for the design, flavor, and bespokeness of the game in encapsulating the sets we're going into. And that is shown most in the double-sided cards. Things like the Attack Titan, where you play the attack and then you build it down as a backup, and unless he is restrained, the Attack Titan's going to punch you again. That is so cool to me. The Female Titan, the fact that they can just keep picking up punches and kicks. When you look at Annie's fighting style, which is very guarded punches and kicks. The Armored Titan, which is a great defensive and offensive foot card, and the Colossal Titan with its huge impact. These are cards that people have put a lot of work and care into getting right. And I do think they're right in that things like Eri and Kota shouldn't be assets. They should be backups. Assets should be about things that aid your character. Eri and Kota are not assets, they're children, and they do act as backup, whereas you have things like the Cape of No Return. Cape of No Return is a literal asset. It is something that Shishi Wakamaru, is it Shishi? I think it's Shishi Wakamaru has, that he uses to win the fight. It's something that aids in his fight. You have then things like, I've actually got them up here. So I'll just quickly, I should have put studio mode on before I did this. Boop, boop, boop. This one? Yeah, and then you've got the vertical maneuvering gear, which is an asset. You have got things like gathering energy and the meaning of being manly, which aren't really assets. From the way that they were described, assets, from the way it was described, assets being things like USJ High, grenade braces, things that the environment, the terrain, the personal appeal of what you're wearing, actual things you physically have. Electricity cape, but then you have things like Trigger, which could possibly, under the way they describe it, Trigger should have possibly been an action. The meaning of being manly, which relates more to the design way that they were saying the design them. The meaning of being manly more goes towards the foundation side of things. Same with gathering energy. But those are more outliers that are used for specific purposes. Assets should just be things, people being backups. Yeah, people, I think it's a perfect name. People being backups, not even just people, I think if we did get something like uh, Pacific Rim, I think Pacific Rim, if you had things like the mechs, you could have the mechs being backups as well, and then you could have like the chainsaw swords being the assets. Backup being things which literally backups being things that are outside forces that aid you is cool. Especially when they're more designed for living beings. Assets being more environmental does make some more sense. Trinket is a great example. So, like I said, Knott's Flask being an asset makes perfect sense. It is something that Knott uses to help, but Trinket is not an asset. Trinket is a member of the team. So if you had an attack that was just... if you just had an attack that was Vex and Trinket that then said Shift, build down, and it was a Trinket backup, that's cool. That is very, very cool. And I think backups will be very cool in some kind of challenger IPs. So, Critical Role, for example, we didn't get Scallan or Grog or any of the other sort of like big characters from Critical Role, but we could have done as backups. Scallan being a bard is a perfect example of what a backup could have been. That is really, really cool. Botan does have their own character, but we had Botan's coaching, which was a very cool foundation because it relies on what was being an outside force that helped them motivate in the fight. But Botan could have also been a backup. There's so many options we can have doing it. We don't know what we're going to get. We don't know the IPs we're going to get moving forward. And I'm sure once we do, we can all start going on. But it gives us much more freedom to wildly speculate, is the way I'll put it. I like the idea, like looking at Dark Hero Arc. Now that we know that it's going to be Vigilante Deku with a flip effect, if we get, say, a Black Whip attack, which then flips and builds down into the Black Whip holder, that is awesome. That is so cool because of how the quirk currently works. He can communicate with the past holders, and with the Black Whip and kind of more opened up. So having him go Black Whip, build it down, and then having something that aids Deku further on. Danger Sense. Oh my god, Danger Sense is a backup. Let's go. It'd be very cool. You can have things like Nana with the floats, with the float quirk. Have it come in as a high attack, and then have it build down as an asset, which allows you to make things high attacks. It is so flavorful. I love backups so much. I cannot get it. I've done like a full 180 on backups. I think they're very, very cool. But last part of the article, mental load on double-sided cards. It is correct. The community has been 100% correct in stating that backups do not reduce, but these flip cards do not reduce mental load. If anything, they increase it, and that is not great in all honesty. But it's not as much as it would be on a separate card. You're not really thinking of, oh, I can't go into the attack here, or it's more of a consumable. Yeah, it's more of a consumable mental load because of the fact that it's all kind of, as it says in here, you do it through in statements. It's a case of, it's not going, if you open your hand, it's 2 attacks, 2 assets, 2 foundations going, what do I do here? With these shift cards, you go, cool, I have 4 attacks and 2 foundations. Do I have enough foundations to comfortably attack? Yes. These attacks are quite high cost, but I do have the choice to build them down afterwards. I'll put them to momentum if they hit. Awesome. So you can make your turn, and essentially make the backups a future problem. You decide at the end of the turn you're delaying the gratification of the backups. You don't have to make all those decisions now. It's an installment-based delayed gratification system. That is very, very cool. Whether it works in practice, I'm not too sure, because even if you can delay thinking about the backup, it's still kind of going to be in your mind as you're playing it, and it's going to be in your opponent's mind. And with things like decoy, Genkai's explanation, the attacks are not going to be guaranteed to be built down. But I think it's pretty cool. I think backups are very, very cool. I think this article is a great way to let people who were not sure, or that thought we were just becoming a kind of like magic ripoff, actually gets to take a look at why we have these cards now, rather than just being like, oh, we're just building planeswalkers. And I think that's really, really cool. I think Matt did a great job in briefly explaining this. Personally, my only downside to this article is there's not enough Universus examples. So we have the example like here, or we have Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker walks down the hallway. You could have literally just used one of the shift cards. I mean, like, there's a lot of logic in that approach. As a noun, say, the attack titan is often very filling, while a verb phrase like the attack titan attacks can be important to the story but less compelling as a takeaway than the noun. That works just as well. We didn't need to bring in outside like IPs. Reminding people, like, Star Wars Unlimited exists. Ryu is a good one because Ryu is part of the game, but you could have also just gone in with Jiro with this. You could be like, why characters are motivated to do what they do, but not a literal physical foundation. For example, Ryu's training. Ryu's training to be a fighter, so you could change that to Jiro's. Jiro's training to be a hero, because Jiro is a very more controversial case for heroes, because her family are musicians. Her ability is more geared toward like the musical side, and her parents never really approved of her being a hero. It was a whole, like, that's what the music festival arc was really going about. It was like you got to see a lot of Jiro's backstory. So you could be like, Jiro's training to be a fighter makes a good foundation, but when representing why Jiro became a hero, Jiro's base would not be a great foundation, but would make a great asset in helping players understand her backstory. It's the exact same point you're getting across, but you're linking it back to our game and more relevant cards that we have now. Talking about Jiro and going, oh, this would be a great fun. This is a great example of what an attack for Jiro is and why it situates with her character. This is a great example of what a foundation is for Jiro and why it goes in with her character. And this is why Jiro's base is a great asset for showing the backstory and depth of Jiro in our game. It shows that we understand the media. It shows we understand the game. And the article stays relevant to cards and IPs we are currently running in Standard. Not a big gripe. It's not, it's just a personal preference kind of thing of when writing an article about this game, it would be cool to see the examples and the references used in there also relate to the game. It's something we see a lot when people bring up when we talk about building, or when we see things like, when I think someone used Battlefield in an article, it's like, no, that's our stage, that's our card pool. It's just keeping the articles within the frame of our game would be a very, very cool thing. If anyone disagrees with that, do feel free to jump down my throat. But as I said, this article changed the way I understand the game and made me think my understanding of the game was very rigid. And I am very thankful to this article for opening me up to more fluidity in what a foundation actually is in terms of the metaphysical rather than physical. But yeah, so this has just been afternoon tea. I just wanted to do a quick chat about the article because we're not going to be live over the weekend, and we may get some more stuff. So if you're currently traveling to St. Louis or at St. Louis, best of luck. Have a lot of fun. Play your best. And if you win, I'm going to be reaching out to you to get an interview. I always do. If you play something interesting, I might also do the same. Until then, we'll see you on Tuesday. I'll catch you on in a bit. Bye.